Good afternoon, students. Today we will start with a new chapter called the power sharing. That is from Political Science first chapter. Now let us see what is this power sharing all about. With this chapter, we resume the tour of democracy that we have started last year. I hope you all remember we noted last year that in a democracy, all power does not rest with any one organ of the government. So there is equal division of power and all the organs of the government has been given different kinds of responsibilities. Now in intelligent sharing of power among legislature, executive and judiciary is very important to design or in designing a democratic countries. Now in these and in the next two chapters we are carrying forward the idea of power sharing. We start with the two stories of Belgium and Sri Lanka. Both these stories are about how democracy handles demands for power sharing. The story yields some general conclusions about the need of power sharing in democracy, and these will allow us to discuss various types of and various forms of power sharing that will be taken up in the following chapter as well. Here, let us start with the story of Belgium. Belgium is a small country in Europe, smaller in area than the state of Haryana. I hope you remember the state where Haryana is situated. It has border with France, the Netherlands, Germany and Luxembourg. It has a population of little over 1 crore, about half the population of Haryana. The ethnic composition of this small country is very complex, and let us discuss in detail about the ethnic composition of Belgium. Here let us start with the story of the Belgium country. So let us see how complex is the Belgium ethnic composition. Of the country's total population, 59% lives in the Flemish region and speaks Dutch language. Another 40% people lives in the Wallonia region and speak French. Remaining 1% of the Belgium speak German. So here we could see that Dutch speaking people are in majority and the German speaking people and French speaking people in the whole country of Belgium, they are in minority. Please, I repeat again, here the Dutch speaking people are in majority as a whole country, and the French and German speaking people are in minority if we compare and analyze the whole country of Belgium. Let us see with the case study of Brussels. Brussels is the capital of Belgium. In the capital city of Brussels, 80% speak French while 20% speak Dutch. The minority French speaking community was relatively rich and powerful. This was resented by the Dutch speaking community, who got the benefit of economic development and education much later. This led to the tensions between the Dutch speaking people and the French speaking communities during the 1950s and 1960s. The tension between the two communities was more acute in Brussels. Brussels presented a very special problem here. The Dutch speaking people constituted a majority in the country, but a minority in the capital. So here it says that French speaking people in Brussels, they are in majority, whereas the whole country they are in minority. Now let us compare with the situation in another country, that is Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is an island nation just a few kilometers off the southern coast of Tamil Nadu. It has about 2 crore people, about the same as in Haryana. Like other nations in the South Asian region, Sri Lanka has a very diverse populations too. Now, the major social groups are the Sinhala speaker that consists of 74% and the Tamil speakers 18%. So among the Tamils there are two subgroups, that is Tamil natives of the country are called Sri Lankan Tamils, that is 13%. The rest, whose forefather came from India as a plantation workers during the colonial period, are called the Indian Tamils. Now, as you can see from the pie chart that has been given there, Sri Lanka Tamils are concentrated in the northern and east of the country. Most of the Sinhala speaking people are Buddhists, while most of the Tamils are Hindus or Muslims. So there are about 7% Christians who are both Tamils and Sinhalas. Now, just imagine what could have happened in a situation like this. In Belgium, the Dutch community could take advantages of its numeric majority and force its will on the French and German speaking population. This would push the conflict among the communities further. This could have led to a very messy partition of the country. Both the sides would claim control over Brussels. However, in Sri Lanka, the Sinhala community enjoy even a bigger majority and could impose its will on the entire country. Now let us look at what happened in both these two countries. Now, in Belgium, the Belgian leaders took a very different path. They recognized the existence of regional differences and cultural diversities. Between 1970 and 1993, they amended their constitution 4 times so as to work out an arrangement that would enable everyone to live together within the same country. Now, the arrangement they work out is different from any other country and it's very, very innovative. Here are some of the elements of the Belgian models in accommodating the diversities. Now, let us see the point number one is the constitution prescribed that the number of Dutch and French speaking people, ministers shall be equal in the central government. Some special laws require the support of majority of members from each linguistic group. Thus, no single community can make decisions unilaterally. So, in the central government, the number of Dutch speaking ministers and the French speaking ministers will be equal. Now, the second model they have is many powers of the central government have been given to the state government of two regions of the country. So, the state governments are not subordinate to the central government. Now, the third model we have is Brussels has a separate government in which both the communities have equal representation again. So now, the French speaking people accepted the equal representation in Brussels because the Dutch speaking community has accepted equal representation in the central government. Please remember that in the center, in the whole country, the French speaking people are in majority and in Brussels they are in minority. However, in Brussels, the French speaking people are in minority and the Dutch speaking people are in majority. Now, the next model we have is apart from the central government and the state government, there is the third kind of government that they established. And this third government, they call it as a community government, which is elected by the people belonging to one language each community. So that means Dutch speaking people will also send their representative, the French speaking people will also sent their representative, and also the German speaking people were also sent equal representation no matter where they live. So this government has the power regarding cultural, educational and language related issues. So now you might find the Belgian model very complicated. Indeed, it is very complicated even for people living in Belgium. But this arrangement have worked well so far. They help to avoid civic strife between the two major communities and a possible division of the country on linguistic lines. When many countries of Europe came together to form the European Union, Brussels was chosen as its headquarters. Let us see how the Sri Lanka leaders have adopted a policy to accommodate the diversity. Sri Lanka emerged as an independent country in 1948, a year later than the India got independent. The leaders of the Sinhala community sought to secure dominance over government by virtue of their majority. As a result, the democratically elected government adopted a series of majoritarian measures to establish Sinhala supremacy. So, a majoritarianism is a belief that a majority community should be able to rule a country in whichever way it wants by disregarding the wishes and needs of the minorities. I repeat again, majoritarianism is a belief that the majority community should be able to rule a country in whichever way it wants by disregarding the wishes and the needs of the minorities. Now, in 1956, an act was passed to recognize Sinhalas reg- as an official language, disregarding the Tamils. The government followed preferential policies that favor only the Sinhala speaking people, especially in applications for university positions and even in the government jobs as well. Now, a new constitution stipulated that the state shall protect and foster Buddhism because most of the Sinhalas they follow profess Buddhist Buddhisms. Now all these government measures come in one after another, gradually increasing the feeling of alienation among the Sri Lankan Tamils. They felt that none of the major political parties led by the Buddhist Sinhala leaders were sensitive to their language and culture. They felt that the constitutions and government policies denied them equal political rights, discriminated against them in getting jobs and other opportunities, and even ignored their interests as well. So now, as a result, the relations between the Sinhala and the Tamil communities strained over time. The Sri Lanka Tamils launched parties and struggled for the recognition of Tamil as an official language, for regional autonomy and equality, for opportunity in securing education and job as well. But the demand for more autonomy to provinces populated by the Tamils was repeatedly denied by the Sinhala's majority. By 1980s, several political organizations were formed demanding an independent Tamil Elam state in northern and eastern parts of the Sri Lanka. The distrust between the two communities turned into a widespread conflict, and soon it had turned into a civil war. So now, as a result, thousands of peoples of both the communities have been killed. Many families were forced to leave the country as refugees, and many more lost their livelihoods. As we have already read in the Chapter 1 economic textbook about the Sri Lanka excellent record of economic development, education and health, but the civil war had caused a terrible setback to the social, cultural and economic life of the country, and it ended in 2009. It ended in 2009. Now, what do we learn from these two stories of the Belgium and Sri Lanka? Both are democracies, yet they dealt with the question of power sharing differently. In Belgium, the leaders have realized that the unity of the country is possible only by respecting the feelings and interests of different communities and regions. Such a realization resulted in mutually acceptable arrangement for power sharing. In Sri Lanka shows a contrasting example. It shows us that if a majority community wants to force its dominance over others and refuses to share power, it can undermine the unity of the country. So now let us see why power sharing is desirable. Thus two different sets of reasons can be given in favor of power sharing. Firstly, power sharing is a good because it helps to reduce the possibility of conflict between social groups. Since social conflict often leads to violence and political instability, power sharing is a good way to ensure the stability of political order. Imposing the will of majority community over the others may look like an attractive option in the short term, but in the long run it undermines the unity of the nations. And for example, we can clearly take the example of Sri Lanka as well. Now, tyranny of the majority is not just oppressive for the minority. It often brings ruin to the majority as well. Through the civil war in Sri Lanka, it has created huge setbacks in their economy, social, culture, in every aspect. Now, the second reason why is deeper reasons why power sharing is good for democracies. Power sharing is the very spirit of democracy. A democratic rule involves sharing power with those affected by its exercise and who has to live with its effect. People have a right to be consulted on how they are to be governed. A legitimate government is one where citizens through participation acquire a stake in the system. Now let us call the first set of reasons as prudential and the second reasons as moral. While prudential reasons stress that power sharing will bring out better outcomes, moral reasons emphasize the aids of power sharing as a valuable source. Now, the idea of power sharing has emerged in opposition to the notions of undivided political power. For a long time, it was believed that all power of the government must reside in one person or a group of persons located at one place. However, it was felt that if the power to decide is dispersed, it would not be possible to take quick decisions and to enforce them. But this notion has changed with the emergence of democracy. One basic principle of democracy is that people are the source of all political power, and as we all know, people are the most important source in a democracy. In a democracy, people rule themselves through institutions of self government. In a good democratic government, due respect is given to diverse groups and views that exist in a society. Everyone has a voice in the shaping of public policies. So, therefore, it follows that in a democracy, political power should be distributed among many citizens as possible. Now, in modern democracies, power sharing arrangement can take many forms. Let us look at some of the most common arrangements we have or will come across. So now the first one is power is shared among different organs of the government. Different organs of the government, such as the legislature, the executive, and judiciary, and this is also called horizontal distributions of power because it allows different organs of government placed at the same level to exercise different powers. So now the legislature has the right to make laws, the executive has to execute and implement the laws, and judiciary has to interpret the laws. Such a separation ensures that none of the organs can exercise unlimited power because it has been given different kinds of responsibility. Each organs keep a check and balance the power in the country. Each organ check the others. This results in a balance of power among various institutions. Last year we studied that in a democracy, even though ministers and government officials exercise power, they are also responsible to the parliament or state assemblies as well. So similarly, all the judges are appointed by the executive. They can check the functioning of executive or laws made by the legislature. This arrangement is called a system of check and balance. Now the next forms of power sharing we have is power sharing among the government at different levels. Now, as general government for the entire country, that is the central government, and the government at the provincial or regional, that is called the state government, and at the such as a general government or for the entire country is usually called the federal government, and in India we refer to it as a central government and union government, as I have already said. Now the government at the provincial or the regional level are called by different names in different countries, and in India we call them as state government. In this system is not followed in all countries. There are many countries where there is no provincial or state government as well. But in those countries like ours, where there are different levels of government, Constitution clearly lays down the powers of different levels of the government. This is what they did in Belgium, but we refused in Sri Lanka. What was refused in Sri Lanka? Now, this is called the federal divisions of power. And in India, we also call it as a federalism where the system exists of more than one level of government. Now, the same principles can be extended to the level of government lower than the state government, such as the municipality and the panchayati raj, as we have already learned in the previous classes. Let us call the division of powers involving higher and lower levels of government vertical divisions power. We shall study this at the length in the next chapter as well. Now, the third type of power sharing is power shared among the social groups. Now, this power of sharing can be such as the religious and linguistic group or community government in the Belgium is also a good example of this kind of arrangement. In some countries, there are constitutional and legal arrangements whereby social weaker sections and women are represented in the legislature and administration as well. Last year, we also studied the system of reserved constituencies in assemblies and the parliament of our country. Now, this type of arrangement is meant to give space in the government and administration to diverse social groups who otherwise would felt alienated from the government. This method is used to give minority communities a fair share in power. In Unit 2, we shall look at the various ways of accommodating social diversities. Now, the next uh, fourth types of power sharing is political parties, pressure groups, and movement. Power sharing arrangement can also be seen in the different ways in through political parties, through pressure groups, and movement controls or influence those in power. In democracy, the citizens must have the freedom to choose among various contenders for power. In contemporary democracies, this takes the form of competitions among different parties. Such competitions ensure that power does not remain in one hand. And in the long run, power is shared among different political parties that represent different ideologies and social groups. Sometimes this kind of sharing can be direct. When two or more parties form an alliance to contest election, if this alliance is elected, they form a coalition government and thus share power too. So in a coalition government, two or more political parties join together to form a government is called coalition government. In a democracy, we find interest groups such as those of traders, businessmen, industrialists, farmers, and industrial workers too. They also will have a share in governmental power, either through participation in governmental committees or bringing influence on the decision making. These details you will study in Unit 3. We shall study the working of the political parties, pressure groups, and social movement in the next chapter in detail. Now, here are some few examples of power sharing. Let us ponder upon it. Which of the four types of power shared do this represent? Who is sharing power with whom? Now, the Bombay High Court ordered the Maharashtra state government to immediately take actions and improve living conditions for the 2,000 odd children at 7 children's home in Mumbai. So, here it is. Which type? Power shared among political parties, pressure groups, and movement too. The second example is the government of Ontario state in Canada has agreed to land a claim settlement with the Aboriginal community. The minister responsible for Native Affairs announced that the government will work with Aboriginal people in the spirit of mutual respect and cooperation. So here is share amount with different groups. The finance minister of various states in Nigeria got together and demanded that the federal declare its source of income. They also wanted to know the formula by which the revenue is distributed to various state governments. So this kind of can be in the vertical as well, and it is also done through a pressure groups or political parties also. So it can be in two ways, it can be differentiated or analyzed in two ways. Now, let us quickly summarize the lessons that we have learned today. We have learned about the case study of power sharing with the story of Belgium and Sri Lanka. We also have learned about the power sharing, why power sharing is desirable in the modern democracies. And the third one we have learned is what are the different forms of power sharing in democracies. As we have discussed the few concepts about the power sharing, let us quickly discuss some exercises here and ponder the questions that is seen on the screen. The first question we have is explain the ethnic composition of Belgium. As we all know, Belgium is a very small country, yet the ethnic composition is very complex. Of the country's total population, 59% lives in the Flemish region and speak Dutch language. Another 40% people live in Wallonia region and speak French. Remaining 1% of the Belgians speak German as well. So there are three groups of people here speaking, that is Dutch speaking people, French speaking people, and German speaking people. So here, the whole country, Dutch are in majority, French speaking and the German are in minority. However, in the capital of Brussels, that is the capital of Belgium, here the 80% people speak French, that is, French are in majority, and 20% speak Dutch. So that means there is a quite contrasting ethnic compositions we have, because French are very in minority. French is in minority when it talks about the whole country, and Dutch are in majority if we talk about the whole country. However, in the state of Brussels, in the capitals, French are a majority and Dutch are in minority. Now, explain how the Belgians accommodate the diversity, or explain the model of Belgium of power sharing. So Belgium, as we all know, have accommodated leaders have took a very significant steps to accommodate all the diversity. The first model they have is, as we have discussed, is constitution prescribed that the number of Dutch and French speaking minister shall be equal in the central government. Some special powers laws require the support of majority of members from each linguistic group. Thus no single community can make decisions unilaterally. The second model they have adopted is that many powers of the central government has been given the state to the state government, of which two regions, that is the Flemish regions and the Wallonia regions of the country. The state governments are not subordinate to the central government. Now the third model they have adopted is that Brussels has a very separate religion, separate government in which both the communities have equal representation. The French-speaking people accepted equal representation in Brussels because the Dutch-speaking community has accepted equal representation in the central government. So here again, the fourth model they have is the community government. Apart from the central, the state, there is a third kind of government, that is the community government, which is elected by the people belonging to one language community, Dutch, French, and German speaking. No matter where they live, this government has the power regarding the cultural, educational, and language related issues. Now, the next question we have is, explain the ethnic compositions of Sri Lanka and what policy did they adopt. Now let us see, we have seen that in Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka is also another very small country where there are ethnic differences and diversities in the country. The major social group of the Sinhalas are the Sinhala speakers, which consists of 74%, and the Tamil speaker, which consists of 18%. Among the Tamils, again, there are two subgroups. One is the Tamil natives of the countries, and called Sri Lankan Tamils, that is the 13%, and the rest are called the Indian Tamils, who have migrated to Sri Lanka during the colonial period as a tree or as a plantation workers in the tea estates. Now, let us see why power sharing is desirable. Why power sharing is desirable. Now, we have already discussed that there are two reasons why power sharing is desirable. One is prudential and the second one is the moral. So in these prudential reasons, firstly, power sharing is a very good because it helps to reduce the possibility of conflict between social groups, since social conflict often leads to violence and political instability. Power sharing is a good way to ensure that stability of political order. Imposing the will of majority community over others may look like an attractive option in short run, but in the long run it undermines the unity of the nation. Tyranny of the majority is not just oppressive for the minority, but it also often brings ruin to the majority as well. Now we have the moral reasons, the second one. Deeper reasons why power sharing is good for democracy is that it is the very good spirit of democracy. A democratic rule involves sharing power with those affected by its exercise and who have to live with its effect. People have a right to be consulted on how they have to be governed. A legitimate government is one where citizens through participation acquire a stake in the system. So now, while prudential reasons stress that power sharing will bring out better outcomes, moral reasons emphasize the very act of power sharing as a valuable. The next question we have is what are the different types of power sharing in modern democracies? We have discussed four power sharings. The first one is power is shared among the different organs of the government, such as the legislature, executive, and the judiciary. Now, this is also called a horizontal distribution of power because it allows different organs of government placed at the same level to exercise different powers. Such a separation ensures that one of the organs can exercise unlimited power. Each organ checks the others. This results in a balance of power among various institutions. Now, they are responsible to the parliament or state assembly. Similarly, although judges are appointed by the executive, they can check the functionings of executive or laws made by the legislature. This arrangement is called a system of check and balance. Now the second type of power sharing we have is among the different groups, among the different governments at different levels. Uh, General government for the entire country and the government at the provincial or regional level. Such a general government for the entire country is called federal government, and in India we refer to as the central or union government. The government at the provincial or regional levels are called by different names and in different countries, and in India we call them state government. This system is not followed in all countries. There are many countries where there is no provincial or state government like ours. But in those countries where there are different levels of government, the constitution clearly lays down the different powers of different levels of government. This is what they did in the Belgium, but was which was refused in Sri Lanka as well, if you can remember. This is called federal divisions of power. The same principle can be extended to the levels of government, that is the local government. So now these are the different divisions of power in a vertical ways. Now the third one is power can be shared among the different social groups such as linguistic groups, religious groups. Community government is also an example in Belgium. It's a good example of this um, power shared among the different social groups. Now, in some countries, there are constitutional and legal arrangements whereby socially weaker sections of women are represented in the legislature and administration as well. So now last year we have studied the system of reserve constituencies in assemblies and the parliament of a country, if you can remember those things. So this type of arrangement is meant to give space to the government and administration to diverse social groups who otherwise would feel alienated from the government. This method is used to give minority communities in a fair share in power. Now the next last group of people or types of power sharing is through political parties, pressure groups and movement. These groups control or influence those in power. In a democracy, the citizens must have the freedom to choose among various contenders for power. In contemporary democracy, it takes the form of competition among the different parties. Such competitions ensure that power does not remain in one hand. And in the long run, power will share among different political parties that represent different ideologies and social groups as well. So now, these are the four different types of power sharing that exist in the modern democracies. Now we conclude this chapter, and if you have any doubts regarding on this chapter, you can note it down and we'll clarify it once you're back to school. Thank you.